Welcome back, everyone. This is Lesson 3. Now, like life itself, coaching is really about relationships, and we are shaped by the nature and extent of our social interactions to a degree. In Part 3, we will look at important relationship qualities and issues that are core to the daily life of a lifestyle fitness or wellness coach. Now, most people are engaged in some form of a helping relationship each day, especially if they are a coach or working in an allied coaching field. Some types of help occur informally, and other types of help have more formal applications and context. On top of that, expectations of those who help vary according to whether the help comes from a family, a friend, or a professional. Typically, professional helpers or coaches have greater responsibilities throughout the helping process and are expected to be objective, purposeful, and knowledgeable. If we are to consider how well we function within relationships, a recent concept has emerged to help frame the relevant aspects of personal readiness and ability, and this is known as emotional intelligence. And because we have a greater understanding of this, we are able to broaden our appreciation of human competencies. Emotional intelligence also states that critical elements of emotional intelligence include the degree to which an individual or a client has self-awareness, is able to self-regulate personal behaviors, is self-motivating, is capable of experiencing and expressing empathy, and can readily access personal resources as needed. In order to promote growth through a positive coaching experience given to a client, we have to understand that the beliefs others have about us can carry substantial weight or be very important. One example of this fact can be found in studies of what is known as the self-fulfilling prophecy. This means that one person's expectations of another's behavior, which are presented repeatedly over time, tend to be incorporated by the other and enacted in accordance with that expectation. Coach attitudes and feelings toward the client are far more important in determining outcomes than any particular skill or technique that the coach possesses. And with that in mind, it's important for coaches to ask themselves during the process of working with the client if they are acting so that the client will perceive them as trustworthy. Other self-assessment items include allowing yourself to experience positive attitudes of warmth, caring, interest, and respect for clients. Coaches should also feel confident or strong enough as a person to separate themselves from their clients and to also feel secure enough to permit clients to have their own space or separate nature. Another skill to assess is your ability to fully empathize with the client's feelings and perspectives without evaluating or judging them. A number of factors will shape or influence how the coach and client relationship forms, and a lot of these factors rely on the coach's awareness, attentiveness, and use of their self-awareness in relation to his or her client. Furthermore, an alliance between the coach and his or her client is a required part of lifestyle fitness or lifestyle wellness coaching, and in most coaching literature, use of the term working alliance is used to provide perspective and an understanding of what needs to occur between the coach and client. We would also describe coaching as a partnership and an agreement to collaborate with the client toward an agenda or a planned outcome. There are 3 necessary elements of this alliance between the coach and client. First is the agreement on goals between both parties. Building upon that, the second element is to agree on what tasks or duties or skills are required. Lastly, there has to be a healthy emotional bond that's established between the coach and the client. In consideration of the coach's behavior, a few different dimensions have to be understood. And that's because coaches may have needs for intimacy that are either excessive or insufficient to form effective alliances with clients. And this is another way of saying that a coach has to be careful to not get too emotionally connected to a client and their needs or their goals or their situation. Sometimes we see that there may be a need for approval that sometimes represents a reversal of roles between the coach and client. Some coaches make the mistake of being too transparent and disclosing personal information at a level that could become uncomfortable for the client. However, an emotional bond must still be present to some degree between the coach and the client, and the coach's level of emotional expression becomes more or less appropriate to a particular client based on the client agenda. It's probably not a real surprise that a lot of the characteristics and traits seen in effective coaching and coaching behavior draw from the wider field of counseling. For this course, integrating the 7 characteristics seen before you are recommended in order to capture the most important dynamics of a coach's thoughts, feelings, and actions. A congruent coach understands their own values and motivation and shows empathy. An empathetic coach would also be one who assumes the internal frame of reference coming from the client. In being empathetic, a coach has to be able to put aside all perceptions of their own frames or reference to be able to understand the inner world of their client. When a coach can present themselves as genuine, they're more likely to be perceived as congruent and being genuine in a sense that the coach is real and authentic and not simply acting according to the rules because they're supposed to. Another critical trait for coaches is the respect for others. Respect relates to how we value others and simply holding them in a positive regard because they're human beings. Effective communication and coaching go a long way together beyond the application of mechanical principles of what to say and how to say it. There are 3 potential problem areas tied to communication. It's important to be aware of the 3 problem areas that can diminish effective communication between the coach and their client. Coaches should be mindful of 3 main conditions while they're coaching that can influence their effectiveness. The ability to apply these conditions will require the coach to use certain skills or behaviors to demonstrate how these core conditions can be effective when they represent the coach's authentic values and attitudes. In other words, coaches cannot typically fake these 3 core competencies. The first is warmth, and the coaches need to trust that it's safe to express warmth in professional relationships and to let a client know that they care. Because being an effective coach requires a strong sense of self, the coach's identity can become an anchoring point in the coach-client relationship. To identify with a client is to give up one's perceptual world and take on the feelings and realities experienced by a client. After the coach has allowed himself to know the client's world, the stage is then set for the next competency to evolve. Empathy, the next core competency, can be broken down into 3 different parts itself. Basic empathy, additive empathy, and subtractive empathy are all ways that a coach can help clients to experience a caring relationship that actually encourages healthy emotional interactions. With basic empathy, we see that the coach's responses carry about the same meaning and are basically interchangeable with those that come from within the client. Additive empathy is the coach's response, acknowledging aspects of the client's statements that may have implied or inferred other thoughts from the client, and then adds these elements to a basic empathetic response. Subtractive empathy involves coaches' responses that delete significant elements or even dimensions of the client's communications to maintain a level of emotional connectivity. Think about the term or the word manipulation. It might just seem to have a negative connotation attached to it, but many experts of social science acknowledge that most manipulation does in fact have an element of influence involved, but it doesn't have to be negative. Even without coaching, some clients may be motivated to change or pursue some goals, but typically they need to have help coming up with the reasons, values, needs, and personal dynamics that relate to their outcome goals. Sometimes these same clients can be the best to work with because they already know that they want to make a change, but they may need help getting started or planning strategies. We could also pretty easily agree that if clients were able to handle all of their health, fitness, and wellness needs on their own, they would not need to hire or retain a coach. But even experienced coaches normally identify their clients as someone who is reasonably well functioning and has maintained sufficient levels of success in their life and is maybe even motivated to pursue goals and change processes. So where is the power coming from within the coaching relationship with the client? With this in mind, influence from the coach should be straightforward and not complicated or complex. Regardless, the coach is in a powerful position of persuasion or influence and should do far more than just be a passive partner in this coaching relationship. Becoming a coach and being able to understand the unique relational emphasis that coaching requires is going to take more than time. It will also depend on the coach's level of experience and training. But as a learning coach, you can proactively seek out some tasks that can facilitate your learning. For this, you might try talking with other experienced coaches and ask them about what they've learned as part of their experience coaching others. Newer coaches can learn from seasoned professionals from their practices and then translate what they're learning into their own coaching models. If possible, try to do some role play and become the client in a coaching relationship. Find a coach whose style seems to work for you and try role-playing scenarios that will allow for you to practice some of your skills. Another option would include a coach finding a way to practice their skills in a small learning group. If you are able to study or work in a group of other coaches, try pairing up with another coach and practicing some of the skills that you'd like to refine.